Have you ever felt surrounded by people, and yet, completely alone? As if there was something wrong with your way of existing. As if your body were there, participating, smiling, reacting. But your soul were distant, watching from a place no one else can reach. Maybe this happens at meetings, dinners, parties. Voices fill the room. Laughter cuts through the air, and you try to keep up with the rhythm. But the louder the sound gets, the quieter your inner world seems to become. There's a disconnect between what you show and what you feel, between the movement around you and the emptiness inside. You look to the side, notice people chatting about trivial things, and try to join in. But the conversation runs in a language you no longer seem to speak. You smile, respond, do what's expected, but it feels like you're performing a version of yourself. An adapted, socially acceptable version, but deeply tired. There are moments when you go home, after a get-together, and feel a kind of exhaustion that isn't physical, it's emotional fatigue. The tiredness of having been present without really being there, as if you'd spent all your energy trying to seem normal. Trying to feel what you thought you should feel. And then, when night's silence arrives, the echo of the emptiness grows stronger. That subtle sense of not belonging anywhere, of not quite knowing who you are or where you fit, of not being able to feel part of anything, even when you seem to be part of everything. The loneliness of someone surrounded doesn't have screams or tears. It hides in the distracted look during a conversation, in the automatic smile, in the gentle gesture that doesn't come from the heart, but from habit. It's discreet, and that's why it's so hard to recognize. You try to find reasons. Maybe it's the city, maybe it's the wrong people, maybe I need a different environment. But no matter how much the setting changes, the feeling remains, because what hurts isn't the place, it's the mismatch between what you feel and what the world expects you to feel. Loneliness doesn't begin when others step away. It begins when you start stepping away from yourself. When, little by little, you adapt, mold, and give up expressing what you truly feel to keep being accepted, understood, loved, and from so much adapting, you become a shadow of yourself. Present, but not whole. Visible, but not recognized. Over time, you notice this disconnection repeating, in different places, with different people, and you start to ask, why does this happen to me? Am I incapable of connecting? Is there something wrong with me? But maybe the problem was never you. Maybe it was the environment. Maybe, at some point in your story, the world didn't know what to do with your sensitivity. Maybe you learned, long ago, that feeling was dangerous. And since then, you've been protecting yourself from your own heart. Sometimes, loneliness isn't the lack of company, it's the body defending itself from the risk of opening up. It's the heart afraid of being rejected again. It's the soul, tired of trying to be understood, withdrawing into silence. There's a part of you that's still waiting to be seen, but it no longer shows itself, because it learned that being seen meant being misunderstood, criticized, ignored, or even ridiculed. And that's where the deepest loneliness is born, the loneliness of someone who still feels, but no longer allows themselves to show it. It doesn't show up in photos, it leaves no obvious trace, but it's in every long pause between words, in every distant gaze while the world spins too fast. It's in the way you take a deep breath before saying, I'm fine, knowing you're not. You learned to survive by hiding what's true. And over time, the hiding place became your home. But now, it's too tight, too small for the size of your soul. Deep down, all you want is to feel again, but the fear of being disappointed still weighs more. So you live on this border, half present, half distant, between wanting to connect and fearing getting hurt, between wanting to be seen and dreading rejection. But there's a quiet truth in the midst of all this. Loneliness isn't the end. It's a symptom of a reunion that's about to happen. Because only those who've lost themselves can one day truly find themselves. And maybe this is the moment it begins. Not in a rush, not with guilt, but with enough courage to admit, I feel alone. And letting that sentence be not a life sentence, but a starting point. Loneliness doesn't begin in adulthood. It doesn't appear out of nowhere on some random day. It's planted subtly way back in the early years of your story, when you didn't yet have words for what you felt. Maybe it started with something simple, a tear no one wiped away, a joy no one celebrated, a fear no one took seriously. Maybe it began with a silence, a distracted look, I'll see it later, that never came. Without noticing, your body learned that feeling was dangerous, that crying pushed people away, that showing too much joy was too much, that needing attention was a burden. And so you started to adapt. The first lesson was this: to keep being loved, it's better to hide what I feel. You began to disguise it, to dim your glow, to hold back tears, to smile to avoid questions. Time passed. But that learning was never forgotten. It became a language, a way of existing. You grew up, but your body still remembers. Every time you feel something strongly, your heart races, and your mind says, it isn't safe. Don't show it, pretend you're fine, and that's how you survived. You survived being light when you wanted to cry. You survived being strong when you wanted a hug. You survived being rational when your chest hurt, but your soul, which always wanted to be whole, grew small. This loneliness that follows you today is the echo of that time. It's the absence of the answers you needed to hear. It's the emptiness that remained where affection should have been. Maybe as a child, you were the easy one. The one who never caused trouble, who figured everything out alone, who always seemed too mature for their age. People around you would say, she's so calm, he's so independent, no trouble at all. And you got used to being praised for not needing, but inside, you just wanted to be able to need without guilt. When a child is forced to grow up too soon, they don't become strong, they just learn not to ask for help. And over time, that forced independence becomes emotional isolation. You learned to be quiet so you wouldn't bother, to give in so you wouldn't lose, to please so you'd be accepted, and to smile even when you wanted to disappear. Love, the way you learned it, came with conditions. Be light, be good, don't feel too much, and that's why, today, you struggle to let go. Because love is still tied to vigilance, to that constant effort not to be too much for the other. You learned to fit into small spaces, shallow conversations, bonds that don't really touch you. But inside you, there's a part that never wanted to fit. It wanted to belong. And that difference is huge. Fitting in is adapting to someone else's space. Belonging is being accepted exactly as you are. The problem is, when you grow up without feeling you belong, the mind creates a model of love based on absence. It learns that love is something you need to earn, something to achieve something that might vanish if you're fully yourself. So the heart lives in survival mode. It wants to be loved, but fears the cost. And this confusion repeats in every relationship. You move closer, but never fully. You love, but with one foot on the brake. You feel, but quickly rationalize. It's as if there were an invisible wall between you and others. And in a way, there is. That wall is made of old attempts to protect yourself. Of promises you made to yourself as a child. I'll never cry for anyone again. I won't need anyone. I'll handle it alone. These promises, born from fear, became the rules of your adult life. And that's why, even when someone loves you, something inside you doubts. Not because you don't trust the other, but because you don't trust that love can last if you're completely you. You learned to love cautiously, to measure what you feel before feeling, to translate your heart into logic before you speak. And sometimes, even when you receive affection, you feel guilty, as if you weren't worthy of it, as if at some point you might lose it. But that fear isn't your present. It's the fear of a version of you that still lives back there, the child who learned to dim their light to keep fitting in someone's life. That part of you doesn't want to get in the way, doesn't want to be rejected, doesn't want to relive abandonment, but it still wants to be seen. It wants someone to look at it and say, you can feel. It's okay to need. You don't have to be light to be loved, and maybe that someone needs to be you. Because as long as you keep seeking outside the validation your past denied, loneliness will keep showing up. It isn't the enemy, it's the reminder. A reminder that there's a part of you waiting to come home. And the return begins with a choice. To stop running from what you feel. It's not about finding a new person. It's about refinding what was forgotten. Your own presence. And little by little, when that reconnection begins, you notice something that changes everything. It's not other people's love that saves you. It's the love you give yourself that finally frees you from loneliness. When the mind forgets, the body remembers. It remembers everything that once hurt. It remembers the times you felt something and were punished for it. It remembers every moment when love seemed dangerous. Even now, as an adult, your body lives as if at war. It watches every gesture, tone of voice, facial expression, scanning for threats, where maybe there are none anymore. You might be sitting in a cafe with someone who likes you, but inside, there's invisible tension, a slight discomfort, as if something were about to go wrong, as if the ground could open up at any moment again. That's the body in defense mode. A body that learned to survive, not to relax. A body that still believes feeling is risky. When someone gets too close, your heart speeds up. Not from joy, but from alert. The touch that should feel affectionate becomes an invasion. The gaze that should be connection becomes judgment. And you catch yourself acting as if there were danger, even when love is trying to reach you. It's strange, isn't it? Wanting affection and fearing it at the same time. Reaching out and seconds later wanting to pull back. Smiling and wanting to disappear. Receiving care and at the same time feeling guilt. This happens because your body is still locked in an old belief. If I relax, I'll get hurt. If I trust, I'll lose. If I'm myself, I won't be loved. These sentences aren't in your rational mind. They're etched into your automatic reactions. In the muscles that tense when someone approaches. In the tight chest when you try to say what you feel. In the short breath when someone looks you in the eyes. It's as if the body built an invisible armor. One that protects, but also isolates. And the more you protect yourself, the more lonely you become. The mind can say, it's okay, but the body doesn't believe it. Because the body still lives in a time that has already passed. It still thinks you're that child who had to defend themselves. So, even when life is calm, you feel a constant unease, as if peace was suspicious. As if silence meant danger. And, in a way, that tension becomes a habit. A way of existing. You start to feel strange when things are too good. You feel the need to create a bit of chaos, because chaos is familiar. It reminds you of home, of the emotional environment where you learn to exist. That's why, sometimes, when love arrives, you sabotage it. You start small arguments, you pull away, you go quiet, or convince yourself you don't deserve it. It's not lack of love, it's the body trying to keep the balance it knows, and the balance it knows is pain. You learned to live on alert, and now the body doesn't know how to switch off. It reads affection as a threat, because once, affection came with rejection. A hug that ended with criticism. A compliment followed by comparison. a caress that turned into control. And so your body learned, it isn't safe to let my guard down, but the cost of this defense is high. Because the same barrier that keeps pain out also keeps love out, and what remains is emptiness. The sense of being alive, but disconnected. Of being surrounded, but not feeling. Maybe that's why you keep trying to understand what you feel. Because truly feeling still feels dangerous. So you rationalize, analyze, explain, but don't feel. You became an expert at translating emotions into logic. But sometimes the body doesn't want logic, it wants rest. It wants to breathe without fear. It wants to surrender to a hug without planning an escape route. It wants to close its eyes and trust that, this time, the danger isn't there. But for that to happen, you need to do something very hard. Teach your body that the danger has passed. And that doesn't happen all at once. It happens in small gestures. When you let yourself cry without apologizing, when you feel anger and don't judge yourself, when you let someone see you without masks, when you allow love in, even slowly. Each of these small permissions is a message to the body. It's safe now. You can lower your guard. You can stay. Little by little, something shifts. The tension starts to release. Your breath deepens. Presence stops being a performance and becomes a natural state. That's when the body and soul start talking again. And that's where loneliness begins to dissolve. Because loneliness isn't just the absence of someone. It's the separation between parts of yourself. It's the mind moving too fast while the body still lives in the past. But when you allow yourself to feel, the two walk together again. And life, which once seemed gray, starts to gain color again. You begin to notice touch, smell, sound, warmth. The little things: wind on your skin, water on your face, the weight of a hug, regaining meaning. And in that moment, you realize the body was never the enemy, it was always the guardian. The one that stood when everything else fell. The one that kept you alive when love wasn't around. It just needs someone now to tell it. You can rest. You don't have to defend all the time. You're safe. And maybe that someone needs to be you. Why doesn't other people's love get in? Why, even when someone says, "I'm here," does something in you not fully believe? It's not because you don't know how to love. It's not because you weren't born for this. The root of the mismatch is subtler. It's out of sync. On one side, there's the adult you learn to show the world. Functional, careful, attentive, rational. On the other, there's the part of you that stopped in time, the child who had to stay quiet to keep belonging. When love arrives today, it knocks on the door of the version you present. But the one who needs to open it is the part that stayed inside, small, suspicious, still watching the hallway. Love comes down the right hallway, and stops at the wrong doorknob. That's why you hear "I love you" and feel little. You receive affection and get tense. You get attention and feel observed, not embraced. It's not a lack of love, it's a lack of internal recognition. Who's receiving the love isn't the one who needs it. Think of a dance. On the outside, your steps are correct. You know how to lead, to follow, to smile in pictures, to greet at the right moment. But inside, the rhythm won't sync. The music plays and your body hesitates. Half a beat, that delay is the root of the mismatch. The child in you is still deciding if this music is safe. She asks, without words, "If I give in, will I be left? If I relax, will someone laugh at me? If I show what I feel, will they call me too much?" In the face of these questions, you developed strategies. All very smart. All very understandable. You learned to love by controlling. Give a little, watch the response, then give a bit more. You check the temperature of affection, measure distance, test the ground. If you sense risk, you step back. You learned to love by explaining, building arguments about your own feelings, translating each emotion, organizing internal lists, so love doesn't catch you off guard like a jump scare. You learn to love by delaying. When I'm better, when I'm ready, when I'm sure, when it stops hurting. Meanwhile, life runs on standby, and your heart looks out the window, asking for a chance to exist. Now you learn to love by holding, you carry. The other, soothe, solve, rearrange, fix, because giving felt safer than receiving. Receiving exposes you. Giving protects you. These strategies keep the relationship standing, but they don't bring it in. What protected you from abandonment now protects you from intimacy. The root of the mismatch also shows in how you read signals. A delayed reply becomes proof of disinterest. A quieter day becomes announced rejection. A request for space becomes confirmation that you're too much. The body in defense doesn't see nuance, it sees threat. And threat isn't negotiated, it's avoided. So you build small barriers. Words you don't say, topics you avoid, truths you don't admit. You live in lit corridors, keeping the bedroom doors always closed. It's a tidy house, but not a home. This mismatch worsens when you confuse approval with acceptance. Approval celebrates you when you're in the expected shape. Stable, pleasant, useful, light. Acceptance embraces you when you're out of shape, sad, intense, ambivalent, human. When you grow up needing approval to feel safe, intimacy becomes a stage. You perform, not to disappoint. And performing is the opposite of surrendering. On stage, you stay above the waterline, showing the easy, hiding the true, and love, which is a dive, never reaches the bottom. There's another quiet mechanism, the broken mirror. If early on they reflected back that your emotions were too much, confusing, inconvenient, you learn to see yourself through that lens, and when someone offers you something good today, the inner mirror answers, "That's not for me," the person says, "Stay." The mirror replies, "I'm a burden." The person says, "I like you." The mirror replies, "They haven't really seen me." The person says, "I want to hear you." The mirror replies, "If I speak, I'll lose them." As long as that mirror mediates your meetings, you'll feel affection as a gift addressed to someone else, someone who looks like you, but isn't you, and that sense of being replaceable follows you like a shadow. So how do you align the parts? How do you turn the dance into an encounter? First, by recognizing that the root of the mismatch isn't in the other, it's in the internal mismatch. It's not about finding the right person who never triggers your defenses. It's about being able to return to yourself while you're with someone. You practice this in small acts of honesty that don't break you. Instead of staying silent, you say, "I get anxious when replies take a while because my mind fills the gaps with fear." It's not an accusation, it's a revelation. For a second, the child put her face at the window. Instead of smiling and swallowing it, you say, "This hit me in a way, I'm still understanding. Can I go slow?" You don't need a perfect speech, you just need not to abandon yourself. Instead of controlling the script, you confess, "I don't know what this will become, but I want to try." You swap certainty for a commitment to presence. These gestures are small on the outside, but huge on the inside. Because they do something your story almost never did, they include you in your own bond. Another essential piece, distinguishing danger from discomfort. Danger threatens your integrity. Discomfort threatens your habit. Most emotional escapes aren't from danger, they're escapes from the discomfort of receiving love, when your body was trained to anticipate pain. If you learn to bear that discomfort for a few more seconds, the body discovers it didn't die, and that repeated discovery becomes trust. Trust isn't born from promises, it's born from embodied experiences. A touch that doesn't become control. A no that doesn't become abandonment, a silence that doesn't become lack of love. Each new experience makes a small crack in the old mirror, and through that crack, light comes in. There's also the matter of choice. You didn't choose what formed you, but you can choose how you meet it now. You can choose to speak 5 seconds after fear. You can choose to breathe before going quiet. You can choose to ask for a hug and stay 3 seconds longer than you would. You can choose to say, I felt jealous, I missed you, I felt joy. These choices aren't dramatic. They're discreet, almost invisible, but they build a bridge where there used to be drawbridges. The root of the mismatch begins to give way when you allow yourself to be seen. Not completely, not all at once, but enough for life to touch your body, not just your head. Then something changes in the other as well. When you turn off the performance, the other stops watching and starts participating. When you give up control, the bond leaves the script and enters life. When you show up whole, the relationship stops being a negotiation of guarantees and becomes an experience of presence. It isn't an instant miracle. It's a cumulative one. One true step today, another tomorrow, another when it seems impossible. Until, without fanfare, you realize, you can already stay. The root of the mismatch, at its core, is this: a heart ready to love, asking for a body to come along. A child ready to trust, asking for an adult to translate. A past that has ended, asking for a present to convince it. Healing loneliness doesn't begin when someone understands you. It begins when you allow yourself to exist again. For years, you adapted to fit. You learned to choose safe words, light gestures, controlled emotions. You learned to measure tone, volume, timing, and without noticing, you slowly disappeared. The return to yourself is the opposite movement. To stop adjusting so you can feel again, and it isn't a quick return, or pretty, or linear. It's a slow return, sometimes confusing, sometimes painful, but deeply true, because what you're trying to recover isn't a better version, it's the whole one. The one you left behind when you had to choose yourself last to keep being loved. The first step is to recognize what was missing, not to blame the past, but to finally name what your body always knew: affection that came with conditions, listening that never happened, a hug that didn't last, presence that was interrupted. These small absences formed the mold of your loneliness, but now you can start filling them, not in a hurry, but with presence. And presence here isn't just being in the moment, it's allowing yourself to be felt by yourself. Looking inward and saying, I'm here, I see you, I won't leave you alone again. These sentences seem simple, but the body understands. And when the body understands, it relaxes. Returning to yourself also means learning to bear the discomfort of being real. Because being real can be scary. Being real is admitting it hurts, that you miss, that you feel anger, that you want more. Being real is losing control over what others will think. And that's exactly why being real sets you free. You don't have to prove anything anymore. You don't have to explain everything. You don't have to please everyone. You can simply be. The human soul doesn't want perfection, it wants truth. And truth has texture, sometimes light, sometimes dense, but always alive. There's also an inevitable moment in this return, the encounter with the void. The same void you always tried to avoid. The silence that scares you. The loneliness that seems to come back. But now, that void isn't an enemy. It's space. It's fertile ground. It's the interval where the new can be born. For a long time, you filled silence with noise, conversations, tasks, relationships, goals, distractions. But noise never replaces the encounter. So one day, you sit and decide to stay. Without your phone, without plans, without disguise, and silence looks back at you. And for the first time, it doesn't threaten you, it welcomes you. Because inside that silence, there's something that never left: your presence. Over time, the return to yourself starts to feel natural. You notice yourself reacting differently. Where you used to go quiet, now you breathe before speaking. Where you used to run, now you watch fear pass. Where you sought approval, now you seek coherence. And that's the sign. It's not that fear ended, it's that you learned to walk with it. Because returning to yourself isn't killing fear. It's becoming the adult the child needed. It's tending what got stuck without rushing, without violence, without demanding the pain leave before it's ready. You start speaking to your story in a new way. Understand why you did that. You were trying to survive. Now we can do it differently. And, with each sentence said gently, an old thread unravels, and the inner space widens. At this point, something quietly shifts inside you. People remain who they are. The world goes on with its noise and hurry. But you don't react the same, because now there's a new home inside you. With walls of presence, doors of awareness, and windows open to what's real. You still feel pain, of course. But the pain stops being panic, it becomes passage. You still feel fear, but fear stops being a prison, it becomes a warning. You still feel lonely, but it stops being absence, it becomes a pause. You learn to stay, and staying is the opposite of running. Staying is the beginning of healing. Then something beautiful happens. When you return to yourself, the other finally finds you. Not because they changed, but because now there's actually someone to find. Before, people loved you, and the love hit a wall. Now, it comes in, spreads, fills. Because love isn't something that comes from outside, it's something the body learns to allow. And when you allow it, everything changes texture. Touch is different. Conversation is different. Silence is different. Even your gaze changes. Because when you're whole, your gaze doesn't beg, it shares. Returning to yourself is the beginning of a new kind of love. A love that doesn't need guarantees. That doesn't demand perfection. That doesn't negotiate who you are for belonging. It's the love born when you tell yourself, I'm not abandoning myself anymore. And that promise is what starts dissolving all the other pains. There is no final period to this journey. There are layers, cycles, beginnings disguised as endings. But the simple fact that you're here, listening, breathing, looking inward, is already a sign the return has begun. Breathe slowly, now feel. You're not going back to the past. You're returning to the present, the only place where love happens. And if this video reached you, it's because, somehow, your heart already knew the way. The return isn't loud, it's soft, it's intimate. It's a reunion without an audience. And little by little, loneliness grows lighter. Not because the world changed, but because you started inhabiting yourself again. Now that you've come this far, there's something deeper waiting for you. The thing you called normal for so long, but that, in truth, was pain, was survival. That's what we'll talk about in the next video, the emotional wound you learned to call normal. Until then, I ask nothing. No like, no subscribe, just presence. Because every time you hear something that touches your silence, it's your heart saying, I'm coming home.